Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really provocative blog post from a writer who goes by the name The Appalachian Gorilla. We're going to break down his argument, which connects junk food, welfare, and what he sees as a kind of societal decay.
Right off the bat, he kicks things off with this quote. It's his way of telling you he's not here to pull any punches. It signals a really raw, unfiltered take on things. Okay, so let's get into it.
So where does this whole argument even begin? Well, it's not with some big data report or a scientific study. Nope. It all kicks off with a personal observation. Something he says he's seen over and over again in the homes of single mothers. He paints this really stark picture, right? A tale of two kitchens. On one side, you have what he describes as the freezer of a single mother. He uses his own pretty provocative term for the food inside, Goislop. For him, that means processed, sugary, grain-heavy foods, the easy, fast stuff. On the other side, his own fridge, which he says is packed with meat and basic ingredients for cooking meals from scratch.
So you gotta ask, right? Why the big difference? Well, according to him, it boils down to a few things. He claims men just need more meat in their diets and that they get a real sense of pride from what they cook. Meanwhile, he argues that single moms on welfare are looking for convenience, quick, easy meals that their kids will eat without a fight. He even shares that his own kids eat less when he cooks from scratch because it doesn't have that super processed taste he calls Goislop.
Okay, so from this one observation about refrigerators, he zooms out to what he believes is the real culprit here. And for him, that's the government's food stamp program, also known as SNAP.
He actually traces the program's roots all the way back to the 1930s. And this is really key to his whole argument. He claims it wasn't primarily created as a social welfare program. Instead, he frames it as a farm subsidy, a logistical fix by the Department of Agriculture to deal with a market problem where farmers had too much food and people were going hungry.
Now, what's interesting here is that he goes out of his way to say, look, he doesn't think this was some malicious plan. He's pretty clear that he believes these programs were started with the absolute best of intentions.
But, and this is a huge but in his argument, those good intentions? He believes they've paved the way for some really severe, unforeseen side effects that now overshadow the whole point of the program.
He then lays out what he sees as a direct domino effect. It's pretty straightforward in his view. Step 1, you give people the freedom to eat whatever they want. Step 2, they naturally gorge themselves on the easy, processed stuff. And the final result? Step 3, widespread obesity. He sees it as a direct line.
And to really drive home the scale of this crisis, as he sees it, he just rattles off this whole cascade of health problems. I mean, look at this list. He connects everything from diabetes and muscle atrophy to organ failure and even claims of lowered IQ. And he traces it all directly back to diet-induced obesity.
And then he drops the hammer with this one. He makes the incredibly stark claim that obesity isn't just a problem, it's the #1 cause of death in the United States. Period.
All right, so all of this builds to the absolute philosophical core of his argument. He frames it as this head-on collision between two big concepts: responsibility and authority. And here's how he connects those dots. He points out that the government is responsible for helping to feed this population through SNAP, and it's also responsible for their health care bills through programs like Medicare. So the government is on the hook for both. This leads him to his central rule, something he presents as a fundamental truth, almost like a law of physics. Responsibility must match authority. The idea is, if you're responsible for an outcome, you have to have the power to control the actions that lead to it. This table here really lays out the dilemma as he defines it. He's saying, if the government has the responsibility for feeding people and paying their medical bills, then logically it must have the authority over what they eat and their lifestyle choices. He argues that without that authority, the whole system is just fundamentally broken.
So where does this line of reasoning take him? Well, it leads to a really provocative and, honestly, a pretty bleak conclusion about where modern society is headed.
He projects all these trends forward onto the next generation, and the picture he paints is a grim one. He argues that we're feeding a generation trash, turning them into, and this is his word, lumps, who just play video games. He claims they'll lack the physical strength for military service or the kind of labor he thinks is needed to reindustrialize the country.
And this is his final incendiary diagnosis. He concludes that we're no longer raising citizens in the traditional sense. Instead, we're raising what he calls tax cattle, a docile population that's just managed for consumption and taxation, all while the system itself makes them weak.
And so, this is where he leaves us. It's not really a question, it's more of an ultimatum. He states pretty bluntly that this situation, this freedom to be unhealthy on the public's dime, is exactly what society asked for. And in his view, it's not going to change until people decide that, quote, your freedom is dumb and you want your family and community back. A truly provocative place to end.